I brought this up last week, but I'm going to bring it up again. I'm concerned that our generation has lost the image of Jesus as King. And it's affecting everything about us. It's affecting the way we serve. It's affecting the way, we are loyal to him. We see Jesus as our friend, but we don't see him as our King. And I shared with you last Sunday that if you skip the kingship of Jesus and go to the friendship of Jesus, you'll abuse your relationship with Jesus. So it's very important to get this out into the open, that before Jesus was ever your friend, he is your King. That we serve a King. And that Jesus is not your little buddy. He's not your sidekick. He is King. It's not enough to see him as healer. It's not enough to see him as provider. We must see him as King. And for many people in our generation, my brothers and sisters, we have a too small of an image of Jesus. For many people, we have a too small of an image of Jesus. We have an incomplete image of who Jesus is, and it's negatively affecting everything about us. If your image of Jesus is of a frail, skinny, long-haired hippie who loves to hug sheep, that's wrong. You got a wrong image of Jesus, and it's affecting the way you respond to him. Can we talk like family for a second? The reason why a lot of men don't come to church is because their image of Jesus is of a guy they can beat up. It's hard to bow down to someone who you think you can beat up. And so John needs to bring to our attention in Revelation 19:11-16. Listen, you need to see Jesus for who he really is. And the Jesus in Revelation 19:11-16, you cannot whoop on him. You can't whoop on him. Notice what it says. It says, listen, it says, in his eyes are a flame of fire. On his head are many crowns. It says he was clothed with the robe dipped in blood. And some scholars will tell you that that's not his own blood. That's his enemy's blood. Look at what it says. It says he will strike the nations. It says he himself will rule them with a rod. Look what it says. It says on his robe and on his thigh is a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. This Jesus you cannot whoop up on. And by the way, let me kind of clarify. Let me kind of clarify this. The suffering of Jesus, the agonizing death of Jesus was a one-shot deal for your salvation. Jesus is never, ever, ever, ever going to take a beating again. He's never going to take a beating again. Listen, and the beating he did take on the cross, he did it voluntarily to save you and I. The beating he took on the cross, listen, he did it voluntarily. I remember in John chapter 10, before Jesus was going to the cross, he said some powerful words as if just to get it out into the open. In John chapter 10, you know what he says? He says, listen, he said, I just want you to know this. I want to get this out. He says, no one takes my life. I voluntarily lay it down. That's what Jesus says. No one can take my life from me. I sacrifice it voluntarily. Just want to get that in the open because I don't want you to misunderstand me. And I remember in John chapter 19 when Jesus was about to go to the cross and he was about to go through the crucifixion, the governor at that time, he looks at Jesus and he says, Jesus, he says, don't you understand that I have the power to let you go or to crucify you? And Jesus looked back at the governor with his Clint Eastwood eyes. You know what Jesus tells him? Jesus looked at the governor and he said, listen, he says, you ain't got no power except what is given to you by my Father in heaven. In other words, you're not in charge of this. Don't get it twisted. I'm laying down my life for you, and I'm never ever going to take a beating again. Never. That's the Jesus we serve. The Jesus with a sword that's coming out of his mouth. The Jesus that got flames in his eyes. The Jesus that is tattooed down on his leg. Now listen, don't misunderstand me. I'm not giving you permission to get tattoos. I'm just telling you what it says right there. It says on his thigh, he has the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. It's important. It's important for us to see Jesus for who he really is. It's also important for us to treat Jesus like king. Very important for us to treat Jesus like king. The reason why some of us are not being blessed the way we should is because we're not treating Jesus as king. The reason why some of us are not getting our breakthrough is because we're not treating Jesus like king. The reason why some of us are still living a life of disobedience is because we're not treating Jesus like king. If you're still not obeying Jesus, you're not treating him as king. Not doing it. We got to be careful. We got to be careful, my brothers and sisters, because Jesus said in Luke 6:46, he says, why do you call me Lord, Lord, but do not what I say? Why you call me Lord? He said, why you call me king, but you don't treat me like king? You want the benefits of a king, but you don't want to treat me like king. Got to be careful, my brothers and sisters. Listen, Jesus turned around in Matthew chapter 7, verse 21. He told a group of people, listen what he said. He said, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Only those who treat me like king will benefit from the kingdom. Got to be careful that we see Jesus like king, that we treat Jesus like king. My prayer for us, my brothers and sisters, that as we go into 2019, man, that we treat Jesus as the king that he is. That means we serve him with all our heart. That means we stop pushing back on him. That means we surrender. That means that we give him our total allegiance and our obedience, because in the kingdom, the king's word is law. Did you know that? In the kingdom, the king's word is law. You don't push back against the king. We've got to see him as king. We've got to treat him as king. And I'm convinced that if we could see what type of king he is, it will motivate us to surrender to him.